You want these on the table,
What table?
the little table, or do you want to hand them out
I think
or?
I'll just hand them out because people aren't gonna grab them.
Okay.
So I think we'll just,
Sounds really good.
Oh,
so should we just hand them out?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so too.
Put it up and talk, just make sure that,
Yeah, it works.
oh,
I tested it earlier. And then should I pass these out or do them at the table?
why isn't this working?
Shall.
Why isn't this working? Shouldn't this,
don't know.
What are you trying
this
to?
is the remote control for C3PO. but it's not doing anything.
Battery?
I can, maybe, but I can see the little, lights up here. Okay, I think I can do it with, I can call him out.
Be good, Jeremy. It's gonna be good, buddy. Oh my God, I just had two people just now register for this.
Yep.
Literally
Yeah, I
right now.
just saw them. And people were bringing people.
I know they are. I know. I'm very aware of this. Karen Hager signed up.
I know I pushed it so many times.
Gutman signed up. So I asked quite a few of the people you asked me that. So of course it's coming.
Is the-
So did Rachel. Yeah, I spoke to
Another
Jeremy.
Yeah, I'm not going to do it here.
Welcome. Welcome. Can you hear? Okay, good.
Claire, do
What
you
do you think? Should I
try? Open them. Final, I guess. So how are you doing questions?
I'm wondering.
Do they
you-
speak?
Yeah, no, yes, they're gonna speak first. And so, did you glue this on?
I don't know, where would I change it?
Here it is, I got it.
Um,
So maybe I'll stand there and hand the cards out.
I mean, I'm happy to help you. We don't have enough. I don't know how many, you could raise your hand saying, who has a question? We're gonna write it down, but then we gotta collect questions.
Yeah, I'm gonna collect.
How many are
I'm
you
collect-
gonna read all the questions?
No. I'm going to probably,
So if the green light is on there, what does that mean?
what just happened?
For some reason, when you push a button on this thing, it
It
just
just
keeps going.
goes. Yeah,
Yeah. Anytime it's having it. So this right there, see that?
yeah, I do.
That is, look, that is the back of this chair leg right here.
Huh?
It zooms in,
That is a good looking chair.
right?
Holy cow.
Oh, God.
Yeah. I just had it zoom in a little bit.
How many pencils do you have, Michelle?
What's in that bag?
Yeah, no, did you count?
I didn't count. Rob, if that green light is on, does that just mean?
It's in standby. We're not gonna use that though. Don't turn it on.
I'm gonna actually.
I would try normally.
So-
first.
He is.
Right?
It seems like
Okay,
you did.
so I'm gonna give this back to you.
Yes, thank you. And that,
Um,
by the way, that's not the remote to turn on the projector. This is the projector
Oh,
remote.
but you said, why isn't this working? And you,
I was pointing it at the camera, C3PO. That's,
that's why it wasn't working for me.
yeah. See, okay.
Okay, so can I try it for there or you're all set with you? You don't want me to mess with this?
Well, I wasn't, no, we're okay. Thank you very much.
Because Larry.
Yeah.
After everybody talks.
Yep.
Then 10 people write the questions and then to collect them and go through them, it's gonna take time.
Yeah.
So, and then,
That's what they do.
They don't take them as they're going? What, how do they?
They take them while they're speaking.
And these are already on the table.
Yeah, these are table, but the issue, what I want. What I think I'm gonna do,
Do you have a template there for everybody?
Hello there.
You think about a question.
In your heart, absolutely. He had quite a run, didn't he?
We're gonna ask everybody. Sit on this side. What's up, my friend? You can come in, don't be shy, don't be shy.
And
Right?
I'm here.
Good.
15, 20,
Did I not say that? Did I not say that before? Said we could.
yeah. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
There's about 45, 50, so you can give them out like per couple.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, I didn't.
But we should make sure that the total only sitting on this. And Barbara and Arthur,
That's just food. Barbara and Art, you guys know you're gonna be sitting here, right? I want you, have you met Jeremy? Come on over here, let me make a little introduction. He is one of the five.
Hi, Robert.
Horace, what's up, buddy?
Mark, how are you? Everybody. Well, they sent two buses for it, so let me tell that. They both have them. That was all. I think it should be any from the work I did.
Now
Smaller. What kind of party? We do this. You know, you're gonna be.
where you're. There we go, yeah, like. Like. This thing, sure, joy is what is think about us. Taking over on. Want to make it quick and.
I just believe. Yes. Do you want to buy area stories? Due to. Readers when it came more term speaking, we don't want to stand it up. No, no, I have my here. They will work it. So just stand there. You'll do your 5 minutes. Yes. So why don't we do, let's just do it in this order. 1, 2, 3. You guys have to do it. 4. So you'll do our kickoff.
No, I'm on the Zoom. No, it has not.
Okay, so I'm going down this way, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just take it upstairs.
Okay, darling.
I figured. Would you like me to give you 1 minute or 30 seconds? You've got 5 minutes.
My preference would be one. So I have time to
Yeah,
bring it together as opposed to feeling rushed.
yeah.
Yeah. So everybody feels okay.
One's good. Does that work? Okay. Good. I'm sorry. Hi. Um. Yeah, sorry.
Sitting here or here.
Where, I mean, there's more space here.
Okay.
I guess that's good.
Because I know that there's lots to say. We'll never get it. So I'll give you a subtle 1 minute. Yeah.
Wait. There's Barbara and Art. Oh, and Amy and Dave. Are we on mute?
No, we joined in 2020 during the pandemic. We were looking for really a place for our girls to, study for their bat mitzvahs. And that was sort of the primary impetus to do it. And we just love.
Hey, Joan, can you give me a thumbs up so I know the sound is working? There it is. Thank you.
It's just like, how about yourself? Yeah, I just moved up here in July. And like all of them.
I have 18 people.
And especially my wife and.
Are you talking from there?
We've got a lot more out of Center than we expected. We didn't.
Ya la 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 ya la 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 ya la 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 ya 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 la 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 la. That's so much better than shh, isn't it? Good afternoon, everyone. We've got a nice group of people here in the room. We've got an excellent sized group of people who are with us virtually. And I'm really pleased that everybody made the time today to come and to hear with me from the 5 individuals sitting in front of us. I want to just share a couple of thoughts before we enter into the engagement with them. And that's this. We as a tradition have always held very important the multitude of sources. We don't necessarily simply take one authority's opinion on it. And when we do, I don't think it's particularly healthy. I was speaking with a mother earlier today whose adult child became much more observant. And his rabbi told him that he can't eat at his mother's house anymore. And with having one source of authority, a family has been torn apart. And it's painful and it's unhealthy and it's not Jewish. What's Jewish is to hold in one's hand at the same time multiple sources of information, to assimilate them and to work with them. I'll give you as an example the Shulchan Aruch. This is the definitive compendium of traditional Jewish halacha that has stood the test of time for the last almost 500 years. It is a compilation, thanks to Yosef Karo, of centuries of previous precedent. And as he pulled together all the sources to define for that day's observant individual how to live a Jewish life, he made sure to always include both the opinion of the Sephardic authorities under his own pen, and the opinion of the Ashkenazic authorities under the pen of Moshe Isserlis. And when the two of them couldn't agree, he'd bring in a third opinion to break the deadlock. It was the most wonderful example from already centuries ago of making sure to go to the source and get multiple opinions so that one could make one's opinion for oneself. And by the way, it still stands as the definitive authority on observant Jewish life. We know that in today's world, it is frankly irresponsible to listen to one source of information and assume that it's sufficient. You can't rely on just the New York Times or just Fox News. You have to take a look at both of them. You can't rely on just the Jerusalem Post or Haaretz or, frankly, Al Jazeera. It helps to have a well-rounded sense of input for what's happening. We can't rely on the Hamas health ministry to tell us how many people have died in Gaza. We need to verify information. And how might we do that better than hearing from individuals who have been on the ground and have witnessed reality with their own eyes? And with 5 different voices in front of us this afternoon, we will hear different perspectives, which is wonderful. And so here's the format for the next amount of time together. We're going to hear from each individual sitting in front of you, including from your right all the way across. Karen Handler will speak first, and then Eric Ross, followed by Jeremy Hager, then Art Wernicke, and Barbara Kasman. All 5 have recently returned from trips to Israel. I think Eric and Karen, you were on the same trip? No, you were not. So the only 2 who were on the same trip, I think, were Art and Barbara because, well, they're partners. And so, of course they were. So they're all going to have different points of view. And we're going to give each of them 5 minutes to reflect in whatever way they care to do so on that experience. After we've had all 5 of them, and by the way, I'm going to be the bad guy and give them each a 1-minute warning that they've used up 4 of their 5 minutes so that we can make sure to hear from everybody with sufficient time to hear your questions and your interaction. And so after we've gone through that 25 minutes of presentation, then those of you in the room have been handed note cards with little golf pencils. And we would like to invite you to hand Larry the cards to present questions. If you'd like to ask one person in particular, make sure you put their name on the card. If it's a general question, I'll take a look and see who might be best suited to respond, and then I'll pose the question to them. People at home, you have it much easier. You don't need a note card, you've got a chat box. So I invite you over the course of this next window of time to utilize this space to write the questions down. Don't necessarily wait until they've all spoken, because you'll forget the really interesting questions that you had intended to ask. And so I think without further delay, I'm going to invite Karen Handler to begin the process of sharing a perspective, her perspective from the land of Israel.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you for being here to hear what we each have to say on this beautiful, beautiful, almost spring day. This was not my first trip to Israel. I had been there many times before. In fact, was there this past June for the AJC conference with most of our family. But after the massacre took place on October 7th, I had a hard time focusing on anything else and felt a really powerful pull to go back. While Tommy and I, who's sitting in the audience, have generously given with our dollars to support Israel through this very tough time, it just didn't feel like enough. At first, I explored various 4-day missions, which multiple organizations were putting together, but that just didn't feel like the right way to go for me either. I wanted to stay longer, and I wanted to do something concrete that would help the country in a truly meaningful way. I didn't want to just visit. I had done that before. Through a friend, Claudia Kraut-Rimmerman, I learned of an organization that was cobbled together by a rabbi in Chicago to do just what I wanted. He put this together just since the massacre happened. The organization is called Israel Food Rescue, and their mission was to arrange the details for anyone working on the farms in Israel to help replace the thousands of farm workers who fled after October 7th. They arranged for us to stay in a small hostel type hotel in Jerusalem where we shared rooms and were bused each morning to a farm. I stayed for 2 weeks and worked on a moshav called Beit Ezra near Ashdod, which is about 25 miles from the Gaza border. Each morning, after a short lesson from one of the farm's owners, our group went to work in football-sized hot houses, pruning, picking, sorting, and packing cucumbers and tomatoes. It just felt fantastic to be getting down and dirty, doing something very, very primitive, very physical, and very concrete to help the country. The farm was close enough to Gaza that we often heard sounds of the bombing in the background. And one day, a siren went off and we asked our Israeli farmer what we should do. He stayed totally calm, as I suppose he was used to the situation, and suggested we just hit the dirt to avoid getting hit by shrapnel because there was just no time to get to a shelter. So all of us just lay down next to those cucumber plants and hoped for the best. For some inexplicable reason, I just wasn't afraid. I can't tell you why. Thanks to social media, the word about this particular program spread far and wide, and like-minded people from all over came to this program, including several non-Jewish people. Many of the volunteers were retired, but many left jobs and even young children to come and work on the farms with us. We had participants from all over the US, New York, New Jersey, LA, Kansas, Arizona, but also Toronto, Mexico, France, Belgium, Germany, and England. These folks all heard about this program just through social media. It was kind of incredible. After I left, there were even folks who joined from Hong Kong and Australia. At one point, there were 42 of us on the bus from Jerusalem to the farm. It was hard physical work, but incredibly healing for me and the others to be able to do something concrete for the country instead of remaining caught in a permanent cycle of powerlessness and worry. Tommy and I have many friends and family members in Israel, and in my free time in the evenings and on Shabbat, I was able to connect with some of them because during our work, I really was with outsiders, mostly not with Israelis, except for the owners of the farms. The common feeling shared from each of them was shock and a sense of lost hope for Israel's future. They were utterly traumatized by the violence and the failure of their government to protect them. Gratitude was the other overwhelming sentiment I felt from the Israelis. They were so grateful that we were there and we're willing to visit not just as tourists in peacetime, but also to offer our help in the midst of a war. At one moment, when a young saleswoman in a store in Machane Yehuda, which is a market near Jerusalem, learned that I came to help, she hugged me and we both shed a tear of solidarity. She just could not believe that people were coming to Israel in this most horrible time for them. At one point, I asked a middle-aged friend with young children if he would consider moving after we had a long Shabbat meal discussing all the things that were just horrible that were going on at the time. And he replied with unwavering resolve that he was going nowhere. If he was going to die for being a Jew, he was going down in Israel and nowhere else. In spite of the current despair, I found the Israelis I spoke with to be the courageous, passionate, generous, hardworking, resilient, and loving people I have known in the past, and they inspired my hope in the possibility of a better future. If anyone is interested in going on this trip, I'm happy to get you more details, and thank you for your attention.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Ross. I'm the Deputy Director of the Jewish Federation here, covering Stanford, New Canaan, and Darien. My family and I just moved up here at the end of last summer, and we became members here at Temple Sinai just before the high holidays. So I had the honor of participating in our community's solidarity mission to Israel. It was, I guess, February 4th to the 8th on the ground, so 4 nights on the ground, basically 5 days. I too have been many times. I've spent over 14 months of my life studying and living abroad in Israel. But immediately from the second you touched down and you walked through the airport and you saw the displays for the hostages, you knew everything was different. Every time I've traveled to Israel, it's been a joyous occasion, something to celebrate. I was going for fun. I was going to connect. I was going for good reasons. And from the second well, in my case, the second I got onto an El Al airplane, but for the second we all stepped off the plane, it immediately felt different. Simply put, yes, I'm glad I went, but it was heartbreaking. It took much more of an emotional toll than I realized it was going to. This was the first time I've ever been on a solidarity mission. Some of the more heartbreaking experiences that we got to do as a group was touring one of the communities that was devastated, Kibbutz Kfar Aza, with a couple of the residents who managed to survive. One who wasn't there, she was visiting family in Brazil. The Hostage Square outside of the Tel Aviv Art Museum, it's all public made art that's designed to be deteriorating in the weather. So it's designed to start looking worse and worse and worse. So that way it shows the length of time that has been passing since everything began. I think, you know, we were on a Federation mission. So we also met with various journalists, various professors, heads of organizations. We went in some ways to follow the dollars. Our community raised, and congratulations, thank you to all of you who participated. We raised over $1 million for the Israel Emergency Campaign, 100% of which went to go support direct efforts. And we went and met with many of the organizations that we allocated our funds to, the Israel Drama Coalition, Magen David Adom, going to the Jewish Agency and meeting displaced families from the South, displaced families from the North. We met one family that had made Aliyah from Russia and had been displaced through that process, only to then get displaced from their new home here in Israel. What made all of this heartbreak worth it for me was the chance to connect with Israelis one-on-one and to be able to say exactly like you described, to share why we were there. And every single one, I couldn't believe that we were there to show our support. And it made it worth it to be able to shake a hand, to give a hug. And I'm not typically sorry, Larry, I'm not typically a hugger, but there were some folks that I just couldn't help but to embrace. We also, as a community, we made the point of trying to connect in meaningful ways, not just to go do we didn't go tour Masada, we didn't do those types of things, but we went to Har Herzl, the National Military Cemetery, specifically at the time when they do the naming of all of the people who died on that day, any given year, going back to when they started, I think maybe 10 years before the founding of the state. So we were there with people's families and to see all the new plaques from everyone, you know. Okay. How am I doing on time? Okay. One of the more meaningful things we did was the Bicultural Hebrew Academy. The youngsters raised almost $1,000. They knew wanted to go to Israel, but they didn't know what for. So we taught them that, you know, the difference between saying, all right, we want to buy basketballs when you don't know if the people on the other side need basketballs. And we connected them with the youth of Kibbutz Nir Oz, who have all been obviously been vacated from their homes, most of which were relocated to a newly built community called Karmei Gat. And so we asked the heads of the youth activity center, what do the kids miss most about being at home? And they said, it sounds weird, but they miss our cooking activities. We would bake challahs every Friday afternoon for the elderly in the community. We'd make cookies for people who were sick. So the $1,000, which is amazing that Bicultural raise, wasn't quite enough. So Federation, no problem. We didn't bat an eye. We chipped in the difference. And we were able to give the kids something that would actually not just mean something to them, but help them to get through. So picking eggplants, we spent half a day doing that. I don't want to rehash that. We went to a military base. We hosted a barbecue. You know, I think the most special part about all of it is that as a community, we went from this one community as strangers, but we came back as a community rooted together in an experience. I didn't know most of the people that went on our community mission, but when I see them now, they're my friends. So thank you.
Thanks for being here, everyone. Jeremy Hager. So I went in January with the Jewish National Fund. It was a 4-day solidarity mission. I had never been to Israel. I'm 51 years old. I had never been to Israel. I went, I think, you know, what Karen and Eric have said, it actually saves me a lot of my type 5 because everything you said, I can't agree more. And I think that, you know, I was just a wreck after 10/7 and nothing that I did, all the money that we paid to every possible organization wasn't enough. And until I bought a ticket on El Al, I just was unable to properly function. Once I got there, I think what I'd like to talk about today is kind of what I came away with, my impressions, really. So I think that what I think is the most important takeaway for me is solidarity and unity among the Jewish people. And being there, I was one of 250 people. I didn't know anybody. I'd never met a soul on this trip. I came away from this trip with people who I believe I will be friends with for the rest of my life. I might not see them every month, but you know, the next time I go to Israel and say, hey, I'm going to be there, and if they're there, I would love to see them. I met people in Israel who I will call upon when I go. But what I see here is in the United States, we have lived in an oasis. We have lived in the safest, most comfortable, most wonderful time in Jewish history to be a Jew in a diaspora country. And suddenly 10/7 happened. And I think that anyone who watches the news is aware that that bubble burst. And everywhere you go, there are people raging against Jews. And they might say it's anti-Israel, we don't like the Israeli government, but don't mistake it for what it is anti-Semitism. And as Jews in our community, I think that there needs to be a recognition that we are all tied to the same fate. We're all tied to the same land, whether we know it or not. We've had a continuous presence in Israel from the time that we came out of Egypt. And whether you believe, you know, whatever you believe about the Bible stories or anything else, there have been Jewish people in that land for thousands of years. And we're here now and we need it. And when you go to Israel, amongst all of this tragedy and amongst all of this terror and upheaval, and you have hundreds of thousands of Israelis that never No one ever hears about this. This is never on the news. They've all had to leave their homes. There are people in the north and the south who are not living in their homes. They're living in hotels. They need us. They need the solidarity to know that people love them. And that's what was so impactful when you go there and you introduce yourself to someone and say, hi, I'm Jeremy Hager. I'm from Stamford, Connecticut. I've never been to Israel before. I'm here during a war because I want to show you my support. And people in Stamford, Connecticut love you. And we're here for you. It's incredible to see what a connection that makes. And you look at these 19 and 20-year-old kids who are IDF soldiers who are coming in from the front for a 2-hour leave, and you look at them and you look at how serious they are and how together they are and the swagger that they have, and my God, how scared they must really be. But it doesn't matter. They do what they have to do. And you look at the reservists, the guy that I met who hadn't seen his family in a month because he's up north on the border, watching out for what Hezbollah is going to do. And my new friend who I met who has been in Gaza and lost so many of his friends from 10/7 on, saving people's lives. And his matzah factory is in danger of losing itself and his whole community of 80 people. So I think the takeaway is we are all Jews and we have all stood and supported everybody else. We support everyone. We support every type of person's rights to have a good life. And right now, there are so many people who we've supported that are not doing the same for us. We have to be together. And the Israelis need us more than ever. And so what I say to everyone here is if you are even thinking about going, don't be afraid. I was less than half a kilometer from a raging battle. I wasn't afraid. I was in the midst of what I thought was a rocket attack. It turned out there was a false fire alarm. I wasn't afraid. It's the time to go. We need to be there. We need to find ways to support. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, thank you for coming. In January, my wife Barbara and I made our 30th trip to Israel to visit our family. So I want to tell you about our Israeli family. Since 2002, we have participated in a program that sends former soldiers to college who cannot afford the $5,000 tuition. To date, we have 26 students who've graduated and 4 in college. In 2006, we met our new student, Rona, and felt an immediate connection with her and her boyfriend and future husband, Rotem. 18 years later, with weekly, hourly Skype calls and twice-a-year visits, we are family with Rona, her 3 sisters, and her parents. Rona and Rotem's 3 children, now 11, 9, and 4, call us Saba Art and Savta Barbara, grandparents. We have an apartment in their home in the kibbutz in the south. Following October 7th, everyone was traumatized. Rona and Rotem's kibbutz, being in a rural area, was not targeted by the incoming rockets, so they had few sirens that sent them to their safe room. Their security concern was the terrorists getting into the kibbutz. Every unusual sound frightened them. Rotem joined the volunteer kibbutz members who patrolled for 2 months with guns provided by the police. Most people wanted to stay home in their safe rooms, and no one wanted to drive at night. So the family moved their Friday night Shabbat dinners to Saturday afternoon. So what was our visit like? A touching moment occurred when our granddaughter asked her mother, "Why are Saba Art and Savta Barbara coming now? Don't they know we are at war?" The most striking part of the trip were the, quote, "Thank you for coming" comments from everyone. It meant a great deal to the Israelis that we came at this difficult time. In fact, we felt our visit helped them and us so much, We told them we will return 3 times this year. We packed our days with family time, including a birthday party for our grandson with more than 20 family members. We visited with friends and former students. Everyone had a story to share. They wanted to be heard and hugged. We spent time sitting at the Tel Aviv beach with our friend who had lost a job that was to begin October 8th. The wife of a former student told us of the trauma she experienced. On October 7th, she went onto a public social media platform where Hamas was live streaming their atrocities. We went to Hostage Square in Tel Aviv, where creative exhibits and art installations relating to the hostages are displayed. In addition to a long table with place settings for the 130 missing, there's a replica of the tunnel in Gaza to walk through. One of the most interesting things we did was to go to work with Rona. Rona had been hired for the important job of building the infrastructure within the Jewish Agency for processing benefits claims of the October 7th victims. With an $100 million budget, part of her job includes evaluating rehabilitation resources. On the day we went to work with her, we visited an all-volunteer therapeutic camp on a moshav for the victims of the Nova Music Festival. Their therapies are available to the festival attendees, their parents, partners, siblings, and friends who are in need of help. The camp was constructed in just 3 weeks after October 7. It is staffed by therapists who have committed to freely give their time for a year. It was uplifting for all of us to feel their energy. Everyone, including our daughter Rona, was devastated by October 7th, but having the opportunity to help others heal is helping her and everyone to heal.
I'm going to speak about 3 things I felt on our visit: a deep sadness, anxiety, and resilience. Regarding the sadness, what happened October 7th is very personal to every Israeli. Everyone knows someone who was either taken hostage or was killed. An anecdote: watching our daughter Rona's bat mitzvah video from 27 years ago, she pointed to a man who is the husband of a second cousin and said, "He's a hostage. He's 86 years old." Then pointing to a friend in the video whose brother had just returned from Gaza, Rona told us the brother committed suicide. Israel is focused on the hostages and those who have been harmed. And the best way to describe the sadness was that it was as if the entire country was sitting shiva. Regarding their high anxiety, there was a complete failure of the government and the army. 2 contracts were broken: that the IDF is a deterrent to existential attacks, and that the IDF will accomplish the impossible to bring you home. Polls say 80% feel Netanyahu has to go because of the failures. Anti-government protests are growing again, demanding a date be set soon for elections, not wait until the scheduled 2026. The growing protests are reaching 30,000 each week. Plus, the hostage families are protesting, demanding the government negotiate a pause to release the hostages. And there are some who are protesting against the pause because it will compromise the progress the IDF has made. Finally, there are growing protests by soldiers who serve, demanding that the Haredim not be exempt from service, something to watch. October 7th and the failure of the government is rocking the country. While in the US, the focus is on Gaza, Israel is actively fighting on 5 fronts. More than 2,000 missiles and rockets have been fired from Hezbollah on the north since October 7th. And Israel is being attacked from Syria, Iraq, and Yemen. More than 250,000 Israelis are living in hotels and cannot live in their homes in the north or the south. And now I want to speak about the enormous resilience we felt. 5 days after October 7th, the opposition parties understood the country had to come together, and a war cabinet was created consisting of Netanyahu, Defense Minister Gallant, and opposition party leader Benny Gantz. They agreed that all non-war, non-emergency legislation would be frozen, including the contentious judiciary reforms. Israelis do think the IDF is functioning well now. They trust the execution of the war. In that sense, the IDF has made some steps to reestablishing itself as a deterrent to attacks. Another sign of its citizen resilience is how the original democracy protest organization has pivoted and is now the primary group managing the enormous outpouring of volunteerism from Israelis as well as visitors to care for the needs of the families affected. An example of spontaneous volunteering. Our son-in-law's mother, Chaya, has a daughter who's an expert in repairing guns and is embedded in Gaza. Chaya's daughter comes out of Gaza once a week. On that day, Chaya delivers 40 home-cooked meals to her and her unit. As word spread in Chaya's neighborhood, others wanted to help, and when we were there in January, every week 700 home-cooked meals were being delivered to the soldiers. To summarize, my sense was the Israelis are emotionally exhausted, using their strength to move their families forward, absent partners or parents who have been called up, to go to work, to help others. They are not yet having conversations about the day after, beyond what Israeli government will follow Netanyahu. They are also not yet discussing the execution of the war, beyond pressing the government to get the hostages released, while knowing they can't return to the situation on October 6th, when Hamas fired rockets for years with a limited response from Israel, and then committed the atrocities.
Thank you doesn't feel sufficient, but it'll do for now. The offering that you've each given has been heartfelt, honest, and uncomfortably clear. I'd like to ask if anyone has questions on note cards already, to go ahead and kind of get Larry's attention. And I'll take a look at those as we go. We've also received one question already from home. So people virtually feel free as well to add those questions into the chat box. I appreciated what Barbara just offered us, which is some of the whoosh, the feeling that can't necessarily be communicated as easily through watching the news reports. I suspect, like many of you, well, no, I think you, like I probably, are glued to the screen and just taking in too much information to the point where sometimes it starts to lose its context. And so I could ask any one of you, but just for fun, I think I'll start with maybe Jeremy and Karen. I wonder if there's anything that you can describe from having come back, especially Jeremy, from your new point of view, and Karen, from your experienced travels, more of that whoosh, the feeling that we wouldn't necessarily receive from having just watched the screens. Karen, you want to start?
So one thing that I noticed when I spoke to Israelis was that they needed to keep repeating the horrors of what happened on that day, as if we didn't know, as if we in the US hadn't been watching, crying, over every detail, turning our heads away when we couldn't handle it anymore. They needed to repeat it. And that's when I realized, at first I was saying, we know. And then I thought, that's what a traumatized person needs to do. They're still processing what happened, and they just need to keep talking about it because they just can't believe, how horrible it was. And again, like Jeremy said, or maybe all of us said, everybody's connected to somebody or many somebodies in many different ways. And so it's very personal, what happened there. So, like I said.
So thanks for that. And I feel that. And I could give you a specific example. So, and this kind of gets to like, who do you meet and where does that connection lead you? And the guy that I met the first night that I was there, we became fast friends. Because I was friends with him, by the second to last night I was there, I had an opportunity to go to a shiva. And while I was there, at the time, and I don't know how the war has progressed since, but at the time, on the Tuesday that I was there, it was the worst day for the IDF. 24 soldiers were killed at once when an RPG blew up a building that they were in. And so the connection was that one of the people on our trip he knew one of the soldiers who had been killed, who was a 22-year-old man, had studied in the United States as a young person, maybe 10 or 11 years old, at this guy's sister-in-law's yeshiva, something like that. I don't know. To the point where he still had pictures of this kid's artwork from when he was like 10 years old in his phone somehow. And there was a memorial in this town in California where like 150 people showed up for this young man that was killed. The guy on our trip went to the funeral, and there was apparently 1,000 people at the funeral. Now, mind you, there were 23 other funerals the same day. So just think about how many people are going to funerals all the time. And the following day, we were sitting after dinner, a few of us were just sitting at the table talking, and my new friend says, listen, I just got a WhatsApp. If you meet in the lobby in 10 minutes, we could go to a shiva. And if you want to go. And of course, we're all like, of course we're going to go. And so we go down there and we get into the car, and I was with another new friend of mine and the guy who actually knew this family indirectly. He spoke fluent Hebrew, negotiated with the cab driver to take us to the home, which was about 45 minutes outside of Tel Aviv. And initially I thought it was about the money. This guy is going to be driving us in a taxi. We wanted him to wait so that we could come back. We get to the shiva, and lo and behold, it had nothing to do with the money because the taxi driver came in and joined the shiva. And not only that, but when I had the opportunity, we went to this shiva, people that I've never met, none of us have ever met. The one guy knew the family, and I'm sitting there holding the father who had just lost his son. And I've now observed all these other people coming up and talking to the father, including a guy that looked like a commanding officer and clearly was telling him a story about his son's heroism. You could just see it. But I was weeping, the father was weeping. And as I disengaged, I turn around and the taxi driver is sitting right there with a box of tissues and hands me one. And it's that story for me that really represents just everyone there is in it together, and whatever differences of opinion that are going on, and of course there are many, nonetheless, there is this shared sense of, and everyone said this, we have to win. We have no choice. We're going to win. We have to win. We have no choice. And that feeling of unity, which is so pervasive, and there's so much spirit amongst all this sadness, that is to me, and having never been there, but we know Israelis here, that is just this underpinning of the Israeli spirit. And even in the worst of times, maybe especially in the worst of times, that's what came through.
I think for ease, so I don't have to try to move those microphones around, I'll just ask from here, even though I'm behind you. I'm gonna paraphrase a question from home that came from one of our religious school teachers, Maura Drew. And I think I'll give this question, it's a very difficult question. So I'm gonna give it to Eric and Art. Drew is wondering aloud about the dynamic that has been at play in the Middle East negotiations towards normalized relations, and perhaps the plan that Hamas had in their master vision of pulling Israel into this conflict the way that they have, to derail the process of strengthening bonds between Israel and some of the other neighborhood countries like Saudi Arabia. And Drew wonders whether there might have been another approach. Can we imagine any other way that Israel could have responded to this situation than how we have, which is to have gone into Gaza full force? Again, this is a very difficult question, but I'll let Eric and Art think about this aloud.
Yes. So thank you, Mara. It's a very good question, and yes, it is. A lot of the experts believe that part of Hamas's planning was well-timed to try and derail normalizing economic relations that had been underway with Saudi Arabia. But we also now know from the manuals we found, and the IDF has found, that this wasn't willy-nilly. This wasn't spur of the moment. This had been underway, the planning, for probably close to a decade in some cases. There were handbooks specifically for each community listing exactly the number of people, their ages, their names, the names of their dogs and cats, their grandparents, where in the house the safe room would be. This information had been being gathered for a long time. One of the things that I found very interesting, because we learned it there, but I realized it hadn't filtered to the media here, was some of the things that Hamas didn't know were, depending on how you look at it, for the better or for the worse. Hamas didn't know necessarily, it wasn't part of their plan, that the Nova festival was going on. So it's horrible. They came over the fences, and there was this musical festival with 1,000 people, and hundreds died because of it. But the flip side of that token is, how many more hundreds of terrorists would have made it that much further into other Israeli communities had they not been slowed down by a surprise? There's a music festival in front of you, and this one got me. I'm surprised that it hasn't been part of the broader conversation. But the IDF, yes, there's going to be a lot of investigations into what went wrong, but one of the things that clearly went wrong was political jockeying. There was a sukkah that was put up in a West Bank town near, I think, the Cave of the Patriarchs, and 2 divisions of tanks were moved from the Gaza envelope to the West Bank to guard an empty sukkah. There were 12 tanks left on the outskirts of Gaza on the morning of October 7th. Hamas didn't know that. That wasn't part of their advanced planning. So that it's tough to swallow, to think that political grandstanding could have, having avoided that, could have saved tons of lives. As far as what maybe could have gone differently, it's easy for us as Americans to second guess what Israel's going through. We're not citizens. We're not voters. We don't pay taxes. We may have family over there, and we have every right to feel the feels. That's totally valid. But for me to second guess what they're doing, I don't know enough to feel confident in my second guessing. I know what people told me as I met with them in Israel. I think that Israel's, in that awe moment of the shock and awe that was October 7th, and we're 4 months later, and they're still in the extended awe. And but had there been more, I think there could be more done, who knows, but my opinion is there could always be more done to try and do more. So whether that's getting more other countries involved in bilateral negotiations, trilateral negotiations, I leave no rock unturned. That's my opinion on what else could have been done. So.
Well, I mentioned the kibbutz where our kids live. It's 12 miles from the Gaza border. There were 3,000 Hamas people broke through the fence. If the Nova Music Festival had not been going on, those 3,000 would have made it to the kibbutz of our family. And so the tragedy of the Nova Festival and the hundreds who were murdered and tortured, etc., really saved the rest of Israel, because those 3,000 would have had free reign. And I mentioned the fright that was in Israel until the army regrouped and took back the country. It was very real. And Israelis, since 48, 67, Israelis have always felt that their army is keeping the country safe. But what you mentioned about moving the tanks from the Gaza border to the West Bank are just a series of mistakes that the army has not made any mistake like this that I can remember. So that was frightening. And I guess that's about what
Sure. I think one thing that, we here in America, I think we are often trying to look at the Middle East and Israel and the Arab countries through our own kind of liberal Western lens. And I think that we are doing so at our own peril. I've done an enormous amount of research and reading since October 7th. I've read scholarly works with footnotes and endnotes and everything about, Zionism and the formation of Israel and all of that. But I've also read about the current situation, and I do not believe that Hamas necessarily acted alone. I think that this really is a much bigger problem for us, and it's Iran. I think that Iran controls these militias. I think that Iran funded in many ways Hamas, trains Hezbollah, trains the Houthis, trains the militias in Syria and in Iraq. And I think that unfortunately, our government, the United States government, and we have United States citizens who are in captivity in Gaza right now. Our government is trying to placate a virulent anti-Semitic, allegedly pro-Palestinian, but actually pro-Hamas bloc, many of whom are in our government. And it's astounding to me that having the greatest military in the history of the world, we have not done more to have helped Israel. It's one thing to give them weapons. It's another thing to say, we're giving you weapons, but we want you to have a ceasefire. And we want you to go back to the status quo of October 6th, when you have a genocidal organization sitting on your border who has said that they will do it again. So I think that that is something that we as citizens need to think about as we come into an election cycle. And I don't have an answer for it, but it is something that I've become aware of, and being in this forum, I wanted to share it.
I'm going to ask another sort of complicated question. I think I'll pose this one to Barbara and Karen. This is trying to decide how to put this one out there. I wonder if you can think aloud about the feeling that you might have encountered from Israelis with regard to what is growing in the minds of many who are struggling with it. Let me be more clear. I'm sorry. There's an institute in Jerusalem called the Shalom Hartman Institute. I think practically every liberal rabbi in America, and most of the modern Orthodox ones as well, have done study at Shalom Hartman. It was founded by David Hartman in memory of his father. David Hartman was an Orthodox rabbi who I would argue was one of the moral voices in Judaism of the 20th century. He died only a couple of years ago. His son, Daniel, has taken over leadership of the Institute and for my purposes has also become a moral compass for our people. And just this week, Daniel wrote in the foreword an article about one of the most dangerous elements to Israel right now is its moral certitude, that its clarity on how right this all is will be blinding them to the risks. And the question that came from one of our audience, I guess you're an audience, one of our members in attendance was, what was the sentiment that you might have heard from Israelis about the civilian death toll amongst Palestinians? This is a very complicated space, and I'm mixing it with Danielle's op-ed to ask whether you feel what I'm feeling this far away in the diaspora, which is growing discomfort, even amongst those of us who are deeply supportive of Israel. What was some of your experience? Can you speak to any of what I'm trying to put out there?
You know, I hesitate to make generalizations because my experiences were, you know, anecdotal, right? So just like generalizing about the US, who are we? You know, we're a million different things. But I will say that it felt like a real existential moment to the Israelis that I spoke to. And while their tendency is to be compassionate and empathic and hopeful for peace, there was a sense, again, from my minimal anecdotal experience, that there was a loss of faith in the possibility of peace. And I started to hear weird little stories, like, you know, a friend of mine who has a house, and a Arab friend of hers said, "Oh, your home is so beautiful." And she said, "Well, have your husband build you a house like that." And she said, "No, not necessary. Eventually, this is going to be mine." I took a taxi ride with some random Israeli, and we were bumbling through our language barriers, and he was now retired, but he had been worked for the gas company and spent a lot of time going into Gaza and the West Bank and all these Palestinian homes, repairing their stoves, their whatever, when they weren't working. And he said that there were hundreds of times when those folks intimated to him that it was only a matter of time until they took over, they took back the land, and the Jews were gone. It wasn't, "I wish we could have peace. Someday we'll share this land together." No, it's, we're biding our time. Maybe it'll be tomorrow, and it might be in 100 years, but you Jews are going to be out of here and we're coming back. And I heard that, you know, again, anecdotal in a bunch of different ways. And I think I rode El Al with a stewardess who said to me, I was a liberal, I was a peacenik. I believed, like so many of us, that there was a possibility of, you know, that the haters were a minority and that most Arabs really want to find a way out of this. And she said, I've lost that hope. I just don't, I don't see it. So again, maybe it's just a really low moment and it has been an awful crisis. I guess to answer your question, the sympathy for what's happening in Gaza is minimized to what it would have normally been in a different circumstance, to feeling like it's us or them. So I'm sorry they're dying, but if it's not them, it's us. And I guess it's ugly, but we're in it to win it. So.
I think, Karen, you expressed it beautifully. I want to mention, for anyone who's interested in really following Israel, there's an online publication called The Times of Israel, which is really quite non-ideological. It really is news, and it's not just about the war, it's about all of Israel. It's free. And it's a great source of information and to get a sense of what Israelis are feeling. Just I just have to repeat, ditto everything Karen said. In fact, this last episode with the aid truck is reported in the Times of Israel in a very factual way. It asked the Palestinians there what they felt. Was the IDF shooting? They said yes. And then it quotes what the IDF says. It's very factual reporting the news. There's no moral judgment going on about the execution of the war. And just to check, we spoke to our kids before we came this morning, and I said, I was curious about what happened with Ye. We don't usually bring these subjects up. They're dealing with enough. If they want to talk about it, they'll bring it up. We certainly don't ask them. And I said, I was curious, you know, was there a reaction in Israel? First of all, I have to say our kids are secular and very left-leaning, from left of the center to very left. They work only in NGOs, and they're very oriented towards humanitarian needs. And they simply said, I'm sorry, you know, for the suffering there, but it's war. That's what happens when there's war. People are affected. The citizens, they are not making moral judgments about what's going on at this point in Gaza, how it's being executed. They're trusting that the IDF is doing the best it can, because they know it only creates negative reaction to Israel.
Wow. Thank you both. Those were really helpful observations. And yes, we know they're anecdotal. That's what we're looking for. That's why you're here. Thank you. One of the things that I've always been proud of, and I have relied on my anecdotal exposure to and my feeling, my gut, is that the IDF is one of the most, if not the most, moral armies in the world. I believe that it has been. Every army has black marks on its record, but this last week as well, Rabbi Jay Michelson, who is one of our scholars in residence years ago, wrote about the statistics on the execution of this war. And it appears to be, according to the best data that we can gather, that for every for every 4 people killed in Gaza, 3 of them appear to be combatants. 1 out of 4 is by far better than the average urban warfare when the embedded army is using human shields. I know it's a small consolation, and yet it's not nothing. I do believe that the IDF is working to minimize civilian deaths. So the question that we have from the well, one more comment from Jay Michelson, which is, that being said, we still run the risk of creating endless new Hamases, in parentheses. And so the question from our audience is this, and by the way, please keep offering your questions to Larry and in the chat box at home. The question is this: it's very difficult to know what winning this war looks like. The stated goal is the destruction of Hamas. It's hard to know when we achieve that. It's hard to know if it's even possible, but if Israel does destroy all of Gaza, has their goal been achieved, or will Israel remain in continued danger? And I think maybe I'll invite Eric and Jeremy to think aloud.
Because of the neighborhood it lives in, Israel's always going to be in continual danger. That's just the reality on the ground. I mean no disrespect to the person asking the question. I actually had a member of the Connecticut General Assembly ask me this exact question. And I have an objection to the premise of the question. The premise is, well, if Israel was to go so far as to wipe all of Gaza out, would that solve the problem? That as a question implies, and it's very asking, that that might be the goal of some in Israel. And that's only the most extremist of the extremist views in Israel. That's like asking a question about, the views of white supremacists here, but asking it in a way that it implies that all Americans think that way. It's just there's an irresponsibility to the nature of the question. Again, I mean sorry, you're over there. I mean no disrespect. Will Israel be able to dismantle all of Hamas? No, probably not. Is the longer the war going to go on going to create more people that hate Israel for whatever reasons? Yes, probably so. But could all of this be solved today if Hamas were to release all the hostages? You know what? I think public pressure and public opinion, because right now the big debate in Israel is how far are you willing to bend? We need to get the hostages home. That's the number 1 priority for Israelis. Not dismantling Hamas. That's number 2. The priority is the hostages. So you have the camp of folks who are willing to do anything we'll call an immediate permanent ceasefire, anything that has to be done. And then you have the camp of people that says you can't budge an inch because that only sets the stage for Hamas to be just as powerful or to rearm themselves, et cetera, et cetera. Sorry, back to the question at hand, which is, I think that Israel is only one player in this situation. And so to ask about Israel's intentions without asking about Hamas's responsibilities to its own people, to the world, to the huge number of folks at the UN who aren't asking them what, demanding a ceasefire of them, they're demanding it only of Israel. I think that it's a broader conversation. And so, no, I don't believe in any sense anyone in the IDF's goal is to wipe out all of Gaza. Even the most extremists in the Israeli government, I probably don't. Well, actually, no, I can't say that. There are a few far wild cards at the far ends that their goal may be the destruction of Gaza. But that's not the general view. That's not the goal. That's not the mission of the IDF.
So I would pick up on something that Eric said, which is I think it's about a lot more than Israel. And I think, Rabbi, you mentioned it earlier. We've seen over the last few years the normalization, quote unquote, normalization of relations between Israel and a couple of Emirate states. There was progress with Saudi Arabia. And I think Saudi Arabia understands that the era of oil is coming to an end. I think that they recognize that their political power and their wealth is right now contingent on oil, but Israel, as far as it goes, is one of the most advanced and incredible, researching and inventions and desalinization and all this amazing stuff that Israel does. I think that we need to see much stronger leadership from the United States and much firmer leadership from the United States. I think that in terms of normalizing relations with a Saudi Arabia and anyone else in the Middle East who might be a coalition against Iran, I think that that's going to be a big part of this. But I think that ultimately the United States needs to get its act together and play a much bigger role than what we're doing right now. I think right now we're kind of talking out of two sides of our mouths, and it's not helping anything. And there's no clear foreign policy. On the one hand, we're saying one thing, and then we're giving money to the same people who are funding the terrorists. It's a big mess. And when you listen to some people in government who don't have an answer, to simple questions like two-state solution, which I used to believe in a two-state solution until going to Israel and listening to everyone say they had a state and look what they did with it. They had a state in Gaza and they spent tens of billions of dollars building a tunnel network. So if you ask someone in a position of power, what does a two-state solution look like? Have you considered what the second state would be? Would it be a democracy? Would it be weaponized? Would it be one that is going to attack its neighbor? And there's no answer for that. It shows you that here in this amazing country that we have, we're not serious. And we're not doing ourselves any kind of a service by not being serious, because we know that what happens in the Middle East finds its way here. And any of us who were around on 9/11 know that. So I think that it's a much bigger question than just winning against Hamas in Gaza.
By way of a final request, I'm going to invite all 5 of you in maybe reverse order this time. So Barbara, get ready to briefly communicate to us what you think is in front of us as important priorities, important action items, important talking points. What is it that this group of people, all those that have shown up today in person and the 18 computers plus, multiples in rooms, that's a big group of people. You have a large audience today. What is it that we need to hear that we might not have heard already from the sources we have?
Well, I mentioned the Times of Israel because the first thing that we must do is to stay informed. You cannot be informed by only reading American publications or listening to American news. It just doesn't paint the full picture. And then when you're informed, that's a big step. And to speak truth doesn't have to be argumentative, but the couple of facts that maybe made you sit up that you may have heard today that you weren't aware of. I agree with what's been said. The solution, in my humble opinion, is sort of, it's like the Ukraine. There needs to be a NATO of the Middle East, of the moderate Arabs against those that want a caliphate. Those being Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas, Yemen. They want a caliphate. The group that needs to come together as like a Middle Eastern NATO are those that want nation states with borders that respect the borders of their neighbors. And I do believe it will be solved when the other countries physically get involved, including the US. They came together to defeat ISIS. Now they have to come together to defeat Hamas and put in place, there's been a coalescing around this idea that businessmen and some of these moderate states would provide the military protection, and there's plenty of money to rebuild Gaza. And that's what we have to hold on to hope. And for me, holding on to hope is having some vision, even if it's remote and a silver lining, but some vision to work towards, and to stay strong and support, and really go and visit. You will be so uplifted by the amazing, moral, human rights oriented Israelis that you will meet. And you'll be very proud to be part of the Jewish people.
Well, this war will hopefully end. The one thing is our Congress is stuck. Foreign aid to Ukraine and Israel somehow gets lumped together and pulled away. And so we've got to hope that our Congress somehow gets its act together and gets Israel the money that has been committed to them but has been held off. Secondly, the issue of what's to become of Gaza is just one that no one has a clue, and no one has come through with an idea that two people can agree on. Should the Palestinians be there? Should it be a group of Arab countries? There are so many ideas thrown out that don't have a chance. And so, and of course, just rebuilding, when we look at the condition of the country, Qatar or some of the countries, some of the Arab countries have pledged money, but the amount of money to put together some kind of country in Gaza and who would be the government for it is something that is it's a problem that no one has come forward with anything that that could realistically happen. So this is, hopefully it'll end in a peace sooner than later, but then after that, it's still tough sledding. So
once again, Barbara and Art have said such great things. I don't have to say them. So I can focus on something else. And here's what it is. We're Jews. Our job is to put light into the world, tikkun olam. It certainly is an underpinning of Temple Sinai. We've been so thrilled as members since the pandemic to see what this congregation is about. And we see, all of us, so much hatred. We see signs. Rachel and I were driving into the city the other day, and there's a billboard that said "Never Again" with a Jewish star, and then there was graffiti, "Free Gaza." And it's just, you could feel the hatred. And there was the State of the Jewish People speech at the 92nd Street Y last week or 2 weeks ago, whenever it was, which had to be under complete police protection because thousands of anti-Semites were out there screaming and spitting at the Jewish people that were going to hear someone speak not about Israel, just about the state of the Jewish people. So the point is, how do we fight that? By putting light into the world, putting love into the world. And as it relates directly to Israel, yes, it's going. If you can go, if you think you might want to go, find a way to go. Go. It will do so much, I will say, for you, what it did for me. And I never felt better. And you could ask my wife, the entirety of my adult life, I never felt better than since I've been back. But even the little things, if you could find a way to help someone, if someone needs something, do it. Find a way to do it. it will come back. And it helps the person who receives that assistance, not only what they need in terms of the material item, but knowing that someone cares. And think about it. Think about how you feel when you know someone cares about you, they see you. So I think if nothing else, that is one of the biggest takeaways that I have from this trip is that's what we can do. If we have other powers, we have money, we have political influence, we know what we need to do. But it's those little things that everyone can do that we should focus on as well.
So while we were there, it started out innocent enough, but after a while, it became a habit. Every single person we met with, as a presenter, as a family of a hostage or of people who survived, we asked them, what more? We're here. Obviously, we care more than, more than you can, maybe not. We care a lot. What more can we do when we go back home? And to a T, every single one of them said, keep talking about it. Tell everyone who will listen about my daughter, my son, my uncle, my grandfather, about the hostages. Tell everyone who will listen, and keep, we felt weird at first, but they wanted us to take their pictures. They wanted us to post it on social media with their quotes. They wanted us to share it with the world, because they don't want their loved ones to be forgotten. They want the world to keep its focus. And in a situation where there's mounting pressure on Israel because of rising death tolls, we need the support. We need people to feel sorry about, to feel bad about why Israel is in this situation. Otherwise, that tidal wave of voices demanding Israel do whatever they want them to do is just going to come crashing down. And I second, if you can go, please do go. There's lots of volunteer trips now that are being coordinated where you really just have to pay for your airfare, maybe a little bit more. I highly recommend making the trip.
I'll just repeat a few things that Barbara said. First, that we're under assault here too, not just in Israel. And I think it's our responsibility to stay educated and to speak to the people that we come into contact with and talk to them about what we know and our perspective and how we understand what's going on, because there's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of repetition of, stupidities. And there's one book that I ordered a lot of copies of, and I give to people who seem to have any interest whatsoever in learning more. And it's by Noah Tishby, called Israel, the Most Misunderstood Country. And it's a really easy read. It's not complicated. It's a quick history of kind of how Israel got here. And she's very honest about the things along the way that have been not so great in terms of decisions Israel has made. It's honest. So just in general, stay informed and kind of spread the word of, what's kind of how we got here. And then just to repeat what everyone else said, it's wonderful to go, and you'll feel your pride in being a Jew will be reinforced from being among, our people. It's a powerful thing. So thank you all for being here.
I have Noah Tishby's book about half done on my Kindle right now. I want to echo what I was hearing, and in some ways was said explicitly, but I'll say it in just different words. And that is what I heard from our panelists is that it is our opportunity to stand and bear witness that the isolation that our family is feeling in Israel is difficult to overstate. And so the opportunity to be seen by us is powerful. How often do I encourage you at services, after you offer a name for Misha Berach, a prayer for healing, to then go home and call the person and say, hey, I'm thinking about you. And maybe even to go so far as to say, I prayed for you. I, for the first time, was the recipient of that. Many of you know that as soon as I landed in Nepal, I got COVID. And so as the team of volunteers that I was with went on to the community we were there to serve, I had to stay back and wait several more days as I overcame that to go join them in the village. And a few days in, they all together sat around a big table and they looked right in the camera and sang Misha Berach to me. And I can't remember being touched so deeply. It matters when you know that someone is thinking about you and sees you. And so that's what I was relating to as I heard your advice, each of you. We got one question that I decided not to ask you, because again, with all the right intent, it didn't feel necessary. The question is, would you go back again? Barbara and Art, you already told us you're going back 3 more times this year. It's clear you would go back again. And it's clear that you want us to come with you. I can't tell you just how proud I am of Temple Sinai today. When we thought this through of bringing the 5 of you to the public to be heard, to be seen, I was a little afraid. I was afraid that we might get 7 or 8 people and it would end up being a lovely conversation around a table, maybe more travelers than listeners. And I love how wrong I was. I love that we had to move from the chapel over here to the sanctuary because it wouldn't hold you. I love that you are reminding me that as active as we are in our own community here in the greater Stamford area, we haven't forgotten our other home. And, you know, the news cycle moves fast. It's remarkable how quickly we turn our attention to the next thing. And thank you, Temple Sinai, for staying committed to the causes domestically, but also showing up when there's the opportunity to hear more, to learn more, to understand better what's going on in Israel, our other home. To our panelists, I just want to say thank you for your commitment to our people and to your gift to us back here in Sinai. And to the rest of you, I wish all of you chazak ve'ematz, courage and fortitude as we figure out these next steps, moving ourselves forward. Thank you very much, everybody.
If anybody is going to Israel and doesn't know anybody there,